All right, this is Chapter 2 Errors, Part 2. I'm starting on page 47. Seeing the student. Theories of child development, including developmental psychology, can help by reminding us that childhood is a unique and distinct time and place in the growth of a person. Jean Piaget, for example, can alert us to ways in which young children's thinking is concrete and immediate, compared with the thinking of older children. Erik Erikson can underline the importance of identity and broadening group affiliation for adolescents. We can notice the ways that human meanings shift qualitatively as we grow. We need to remember certainly that childhood has its own validity, that it is not simply a functional stage or preparation for life. What a child's life is a full life nonetheless. Perhaps most important theorists like Piaget, if we take his method seriously, can demonstrate the power of intense observation, careful questioning, respectful listening, and detailed record keeping. In our quest to understand the child, too often we accept theory as doctrine. We speak a half language of slogans and formulas, and we become immunized against complexity, or worse, we use developmental theory to build a curriculum designed to hurry children through the stages of development, thereby abandoning, for example, Piaget's fascination with how the child knows. In this way, child development too becomes dogma, another obstacle in our attempt to accurately see the student. Observing children purposefully and carefully is a way to get to know them, a way to look more deeply. We need as full and realistic a picture as possible of the child in motion, interacting, choosing, constructing, learning, responding, functioning. That picture will be an action shot. Probably a little blurry around the edges, but a picture that can strengthen the teacher's ability to teach. While groups certainly have their own rhythms, patterns, and demands, observations of individual children are also necessary. Observing individual children helps us to keep in mind that each child is different and that each is his or her own universe. Here, for example, are a scattering of classroom notes I made about a student over several months. Ashley is a delightful child, rewarding to work with, an enthusiastic, energetic 3-year-old. She has an expressive face and body, big dark eyes, round cheeks, malleable features. When she laughs, her whole body releases and roars. When she cries, she is convulsed with sobs from head to foot. When she clowns, she's a cartoon. Ashley is small-boned, a well-coordinated runner and climber, strong, agile, and healthy. She meets the world with all her senses, tasting the sand, painting her face, smelling the clay, and squeezing it between her fingers, scooping the fish out of the tank, operating out of a strong bodily base. Ashley spends a large part of the day in dramatic play, sometimes with the blocks, sometimes in the dress-up area, and often just spontaneously while reading or painting. At lunch one day recently, Ashley sat with Kate. Each child had brought a doll to the table. Ashley turned to Kate and said, "Hey, here, baby, eat your cereal." And she held out a spoonful of applesauce, which Kate took into her mouth. Ashley smiled and started to feed Kate, stroking her hair lightly and watching her intently, face tipped downward, eyebrows raised, speaking in an exaggerated, patronizing voice. "Good baby, eat your cereal." Kate was willing, and after lunch, Ashley took her hand and led her off to brush her teeth. At the sand table another morning, she played with 4 or 5 kids for 20 minutes. Her body was relaxed with loose as she leaned forward over the edge, balancing on one foot. Her mouth relaxed, lips slightly parted. "This is tea," she said, scooping sand into a large cup and pouring it out. "Now here's an egg," not speaking to anyone in particular. Later, "Now I made rice and beans." Finally, she drifted away and went to the record player. She put on the record to Annie and sang "Tomorrow, Tomorrow" by herself, swaying in front of the record player, acting, spreading her arms, and affecting a performing style. Ashley is often the first to arrive. One day she dashed easily into the room, smiling and shouting my name, "Bill!" She wheeled around, beaming to her mother, and patted Kathy's pregnant belly, repeating, "Bill, Bill, what do you have there?" "My baby," she shouted and exploded in laughter. "You can hold it, Bill." This was new, because for weeks she had said that no one could hold the new baby when it arrived. She slithered out of her coat and skipped once more around the room, looking at the bagels and butter on the table. Touching the turtle, tapping an easel, she returned and sat on a chair near where Kathy was unpacking her things. "Put my shoes on, Mama," she said matter-of-factly. "I'm busy," said Kathy, "but I'll be with you in a minute. Why don't you loosen the laces to your boots?" Ashley did this agreeably, concentrating hard. After her mother helped her on with her soft shoes, she hopped to the table and took a hearty bite of a bagel. Butter," she crooned. Kathy said goodbye and left. "Bye-bye," Ashley called after her. Arrivals haven't always been easy. Sometimes Ashley cries and wants to be held, but Kathy is always direct and easy with her, following a consistent pattern every day. Soon 2 others arrived and joined her at the table. She said hello to each. Then, nodding, she said, "You can hold my baby, Jose, and especially Asha can hold it." The other 2 seem oblivious to the treasure that they have been gifted. When the bagels were done, she cried out, "Let's go up here!" She flew to the ladder and gracefully pulled herself up to the loft. She quickly assembled a square of blocks with a window. She concentrated hard and didn't seem to notice 2 more arrivals, even though one parent was insistent on praising her work. After 10 minutes, she called out, "Hey, Asha, the spaceship is ready." 3 kids joined her, and she gave them each some colored cubes and said, "Here are the batteries," and demonstrated how she wanted them to put the batteries into the window. One day, several kids were tracing their hands on white paper and coloring them in. Ashley carefully colored her hand brown, intent on filling in all the spaces. When she was done, she flipped the paper over and drew 2 large hand-like shapes, leaving one white and coloring the other black. "This is Jim," she said, pointing to the white hand, "and this is Kathy." Ashley is intently interested in color and race. Her mother is Jamaican and black, and her father is Jewish and white. For a long time, her favorite book was Black is Brown is Tan, a children's book about an interracial family, and she called it My Book. She recently asked one of the teachers what color he was. The teacher replied, "Well, what do you think?" No, I asked you first." "Okay, I'm white," he said. She then asked about several kids, black and white, and he answered each time. At the end, she said contentedly, "Yep, you got 'em all right." Ashley often ties a piece of yarn into her hair and calls it her ponytail, just like Sarah's. Last week, she said Kathy wasn't her mother because Kathy looks like her friend Abdul. "Mommy found me in a store and liked me, so she bought me." She was serious intent trying it out. Later, she asked me, "Do you know about what color my new baby will be?" "I think so, brown, just like me." Attending to the details one child at a time can develop a richer understanding of that person, of course, and it can simultaneously strengthen a deeper and more powerful understanding of all children, for it sensitizes teachers to detail, to their own ability to observe and understand, and to similarities and differences between children. Child observation is especially important in situations where structures obscure our vision and depersonalize students, where classes are large, for example, and paperwork forms and standardized ways of looking at kids are entrenched, and where teachers have no regular formal way of discussing children together. The goal of observation is understanding, not some imagined objective. If the teacher's invested in and fascinated by a child, if the child is a favorite, this is not a problem. The teacher will always be working to understand and teach that child. The problem is when the child is unseen, invisible, or not cared for. And this is not a problem of objectivity, but of commitment. Pushing oneself to see and observe and understand this child and every child is an act of compassion and an important part of teaching. I gotta underline that. Interpretation has a big place in observing children as description does. One tells more about the speaker and the other more about the child, but both are necessary. Self-awareness and knowing students are both part of the intellectual challenge of teaching. Here are a few classroom notes I made around the same time on 2 other students. Jose and Abdul are the roughhousers, disruptors, firecrackers. It's common to see them roaring from the loft in the book area, through the art area, around the room, and back to the loft, knocking things over, yelling, and chasing. Between them, Jose is the leader, often the aggressor and the energizer. He is not the least activity-oriented, but seems mainly to be involved, even in his calmer moments, in exploring the space, touching, discarding, moving on, touching something else. Jose is a gatekeeper, constantly protecting his and Abdul's relationship by hitting, pushing, and telling kids, "You aren't our friend," fighting to sit next to Abdul at lunch. Often, if Abdul initiates a block building project, Jose will stand at the head of the stairs, his legs and arms spread to keep everyone out, literally guarding the gate. Abdul loves Jose, waits for him quietly each day, and lights up when he comes bursting in. When Jose doesn't come, Abdul is quiet, gentle, and cooperative. He seems innocent enough, very sweet and wide-eyed. He'll play with several kids until Jose comes. Then it is only Jose and him, which is the way Jose wants it. Jose and Abdul are not a popular leadership group, except at times like rest times, when they tap a group nerve and can lead a general uprising. I remember kids like Jose from my childhood. I had boundless admiration for someone who could be so uninhibited and so irreverent. They're both adorable. For all children, it is better to have a caring, self-aware teacher who is haphazard when it comes to record keeping than a detailed and particular record keeper who is careless about kids. Nevertheless, beyond a lot of informal taking in of the child, more formal observations and record keeping can be of enormous value. This takes time, but is not impossible even in large groups. And it is not necessarily time away from teaching. It can be built centrally into the structure of the day. Some teachers keep a pad and pencil handy so that they can jot notes during the day to be filled in outside of school. Others have a tape recorder available for quick observations. And then he talks about my favorite queen, Vivian Paley, a teacher who has documented her classroom experiences through an impressive series of books over several years, uses and reuses a single cassette, which she calls her disciplinarian, a technique that pushes her to transcribe and make sense of material soon after it is recorded. Taking a moment to step back from the group and focus on one student, keeping a running record of everything that student does while solving a problem, working with some material, or interacting with others can yield a rich harvest of information about learning style, preference, and approach, maturity, and disposition of mind. Much of the time of record keeping is time outside of school. It is time in the evenings or on the weekends. It's useful for some teachers to keep a journal or diary, to have a daily record of memorable events and reflections. Again, there is no pretense of constructing an objective record. The goal instead is to create an instrument for thinking about teaching and children in a critical, sustained way. Not only is the journal an instrument for thinking and planning and harvesting ideas, but over a time, a journal will contain many little pieces about this or that child, bits that can be brought together when seeking a deeper understanding of growth and development, or when preparing to discuss the child with parents or colleagues. It is useful as well to write anecdotal records every week concerning 10 or 15 students. Again, over several weeks, a child can gather a lot of information, including, for example, which students are not noticed who might be falling through the cracks. It is useful, if understanding students is a central goal, to afford children multiple opportunities to choose, to initiate, to create during some part of classroom life. This might take form of choice time in a primary classroom, a time when children can decide which activity to pursue, and the teacher can observe the various choices and make a few brief notes on the work of particular kids as they pursue their interests. In a classroom of older students, this might take the form of a project time, an independent research time, a free reading time, or simply a break time, when youngsters can talk among themselves. Again, the teacher can note choices made and approaches to work, play, and relationships. We gotta keep a journal, guys. We got to. Got to. Parents are a powerful, usually underutilized source of knowledge, especially as you get into older age groups. Parents are too often made to feel unwelcome in schools, and we too often dismiss their insights as subjective and overly involved. In fact, the insights of parents, urgent, invested, passionate, immediate, are exactly what we need. Here, for example, is a letter to a teacher from a Native American mother whose son is about to start school. This has been copied and passed widely among educators, but has not, to my knowledge, been published, and the author is unknown. Before you take charge of the classroom that contains my child, please ask yourself, why are you going to teach Indian children? What are your expectations? What rewards do you anticipate? Write down and examine all the information and opinions you possess about Indians. What are the stereotypes and untested assumptions that you bring with you into the classroom? How many negative attitudes towards Indians will you put before my child? Too many teachers, unfortunately, seem to see their role as rescuer. My child does not need to be rescued. He does not consider being Indian a misfortune. He has a culture probably older than yours. He has meaningful values and a rich and varied experiential background. However strange or incomprehensible it may seem to you, you have no right to say or do anything that implies to him that it is less than satisfactory. Like most Indian children, his age, he is competent. He can dress himself, prepare a meal for himself, clean up afterwards, care for a younger child. He knows his reserve, all of which is his home, like the back of his hand. He is not accustomed to having to ask permission to do the ordinary things that are a part of normal living. He is seldom forbidden to do anything. More usually, the consequences of an action are explained to him, and he is allowed to decide for himself whether or not to act. His entire existence, since he has been old enough to see and hear, has been in an experiential learning situation arranged to provide him with the opportunity to develop his skill and confidence in his own capacities. Didactic teaching will be an alien experience for him. He has been taught by precept that courtesy is an essential part of human conduct, and rudeness in any action that makes another person feel stupid or foolish. Do not mistake his patient courtesy for indifference or passivity. He doesn't speak standard English, but he is in no way linguistically handicapped. If you will take the time and courtesy to listen and observe carefully, you will see that he and the other Indian children communicate very well, both among themselves and with other Indians. They speak functional English very effectively, augmented by their fluency in the silent language, the subtle unspoken communication of facial expressions, gestures, body movement, and the use of personal space. You will be well advised to remember that our children are skillful interpreters of the silent language. They will know your feelings and attitudes with unerring precision, no matter how carefully you arrange your smile or modulate your voice. They will learn in your classroom because children learn involuntarily. What they learn will depend on you. Will you help my child to learn to read, or will you teach him that he has a reading problem? Will you help him develop problem-solving skills, or will you teach him that school is where you try to guess what answer the teacher wants? Will he learn that a sense of his own value and dignity is valid, or will he learn that he must forever be apologetic and trying harder because he isn't white? Can you help him acquire the intellectual skills he needs without, at the same time, imposing your values on top of those he already has? Respect my child. He is a person. He has a right to be himself. Inviting letters is one way to learn from them. Another is to structure opportunities for them to be powerful in their access to school, the classroom, and the teacher. For example, I've always given parents of my students my phone number and address, something that colleagues sometimes considered unwise in big city schools whose parents are often seen as the enemy. I found ways to socialize with parents outside of school and to bring them into class as tutors, aides, and experts. Everyone, after all, is an expert on his or her own life. Many are also experts at something interesting, but not available in the conventional curriculum. Carving, sewing, playing, mahjong. Bringing parents into focus can be useful to youngsters and also to teachers. After all, we cannot really be child-centered if we are not also family-centered. I gotta underline that. I also like the ideas for how to involve the parents. I discovered early on that I had to structure parent-teacher conferences in a way that challenged the sense of cringing anticipation that usually pervades those encounters. I did this by beginning the first conference with a simple opening. You know more about your child than I can ever hope to know. What advice can you give me to make me a better teacher for her? Turning the power relationship upside down, inviting information and emotion, becoming student to their aspiration, fears, and experiences, I have become a more qualified teacher for their child as well. I'm just going to stop there too. Get along. Takes a long time to read these long chapters.